So Paul likes to have questions shot at him. I don't think he means that literally. But I was going to ask you one, which is whether you could put your philosophy about business and poverty in context for us, because not all people who work in development use your approach. So I thought that would be helpful. If you don't like that question, we'll come up with another.
No, I think it's a good question. All we need to do is go to the state penitentiary and get a bunch of clowns to write a text. And that would be a context.
Thank you.
Can you be a little more specific about
So you're involved in market creation.
Yeah.
And not everyone agrees with that. There are other approaches, right?
Mhm.
So I think I'm busted for not turning myself on. I think it would help people to understand the how that fits into the world of people who are working on poverty.
So just briefly, and please ask anything that you want to ask at any point along the way. I think extreme poverty is probably responsible for more of climate change, environmental imbalance on the planet, war and conflict, a lot of the things that are a real problem in the planet. There have been a number of attempts to help people move out of poverty. In my view, conventional approaches to poverty have failed. Things like corporate social responsibility is for the most part cosmetic. Charity, while it can make a real contribution, doesn't bring people out of poverty. And impact investing is terminally confused about the relationship between social impact and bottom line profits. At the same time, if you take the world of big business, the dependence on rapid growth is no longer viable within the context of carrying capacity of the planet. The markets serving most businesses are based on serving the richest 10% of the world's customers, as is most designed. And in businesses serving the other 90% is an opportunity for, at least for a certain period of time, incredible growth and prosperity, both on the part of new global businesses and transforming the livelihoods of poor people. From my viewpoint, and that comes from interviewing the people that Cheryl talked about, some 3,000 families. One of the things I asked poor people, these were people that lived on less than $1 a day families, $1 a day US. Why they were poor, most of them said they were poor because they didn't have enough money. And I think they were right, although a lot of the experts on poverty feel that poverty is, the root cause of poverty is powerlessness, lack of education, lack of access to health, poor infrastructure. But from poor people, from the viewpoint of poor people themselves, money, which in the West seems materialistic, to them means manageable, and if they could only increase their livelihoods, they could apply that money to treating somebody who's sick, or improving their farming, or sending their kids to school. So money has a different meaning at the edge of survival than it does to middle class people here. So I agree with them. So I think that the key intervention, the key first priority intervention for poor people is to help them gain access to more money. And I think in the end, the question is, of all of the different experts, if you like, in the world, who knows more about earning more money than business and big business? Now, big business has certainly, many big businesses have made things worse. They're exploitative. They have had a lot of negative impacts. But to me, a multinational corporation is simply an organizational structure for doing business. It's neither inherently good nor evil. So the final sentence in this is that I'm now in the last 4 years working to create a new breed of frontier multinational. And since, for the most part, they don't exist, I'm working on creating 4 examples to prove that this is feasible. Each one of them is designed to transform the livelihoods of at least 100 million $2 a day customers. As Cheryl said, the evidence is that IDE, the first organization I started, which is a non-profit development organization, reached 20 million. But in the context of the reality of global poverty, there are 2.7 billion people who live on less than $2 a day. 20 million is a drop in the bucket. Microcredit maybe has reached another 20, 30 million. It's maybe 20, 30% of those people who take out loans. The biggest unmet challenge in development is achieving scale. And the way to do that is to create global businesses that can transform 100 million, the livelihoods of 100 million people at a time. So each of these new frontier multinationals is designed to transform the livelihoods of 100 million, at least 100 million $2 a day customers, generate 10 billion in annual revenues, and earn sufficient profits to attract commercial investment community. Now, just to give you an idea of the implications for scale, total development spending amounts to $150 billion a year, of which the majority goes for military and defense assistance. And the part that goes for real development, much of it goes to experts in developed countries acting as consultants. So what actually reaches poor countries is maybe 50 billion, and most of that is misspent. So the real evidence of the $1 trillion or so that's been invested in sub-Saharan Africa for the last 40 years is that there's no evidence that it's done anything in helping poverty, in my view. Other people disagree. In contrast to that, the global market is something like 75 trillion. And if you can create a business that earns attractive profits serving poor people, you have a huge potential investment support to call on. But it requires being successful as a business. So that's what I'm doing. I've got the first of those companies, Spring Health. Each of the companies goes through 3 phases. The proof of concept phase, where we come up with a concept for a technology or a business strategy or a combination of those, and test it to see if it works. This is straight out of design stuff. Second is a beta test where we let 25 customers use it for a year and see what happens and see what's wrong with it and adapt it. And if each of those phases can be terminated if they don't work. And the third phase is commercialization. One of these companies, which is Spring Health in India, sells safe drinking water to the billion or so people who don't have it now. And it's in the commercial rollout phase. Another company is based on radically lowering the cost of photovoltaic electricity for village use. A third company is based on transforming waste biomass, waste agricultural waste to a low carbon emitting substitute for coal and charcoal. And there are several others. In order to find a basis for creating a company that can reach 100 million customers, in my view, and that's what's described in the book that's just come out, The Business Solution to Poverty, you need to find a market that has 1 billion potential customers, and then it's reasonable to assume that if you're successful, you can do 10% market penetration. There are lots of those areas. There's 1 billion people, between 1 and 2 billion people who will never connect to electricity. There's more than 1 billion people who don't have access to safe drinking water, or drinking water that makes them sick. There's more than 1 billion people who don't have access to sanitation. There's more than 1 billion people who don't have access to decent, affordable health care, ditto education. So a lot of those areas, then the question is, in each of those areas where there's potentially 1 billion customers, how do you create a scalable business that both earns profit, and the thing that the impact investment field hasn't paid enough attention to, there's such a preoccupation with measuring social impact. But the real challenge is making money doing it. So for instance, for safe drinking water, if you build into the mission of the organization that what the purpose of the organization is to sell safe drinking water at what $2 a day customers consider to be an affordable price at scale. If a large number of people are drinking water that's safe, the social impact is built in. It's going to be huge. And sure, you should measure it, but the real challenge is how to make money doing it. Because if you can make money doing it, you'll bring in investment capital. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. Anybody awake? Yes.
Is it, I don't know, is this like time to start asking questions or?
Have at 'em.
Yeah? Okay, I have a question. My name's Robin, nice to meet you, Paul. Thanks for coming. I
have a request. Can you speak a little louder?
Sure, and
each of
maybe
you?
Cheryl, you can help.
And if people don't know each other, it might be helpful to say who you are.
So I'm understanding that the way in which going about solving the problem of poverty is creating businesses and creating products that are accessible to people under $2 a day living conditions. And I'm wondering what your opinion is on creating a skill-based business where you give, say, big business skills to those people living in those conditions rather than creating product.
So be more specific. How would you do that? And how
Teaching them big business skills. So teaching them budgeting or financing or I don't know.
Pretty worthless.
Could you describe why?
If I teach you how to operate a sewing machine to make attractive dresses, what are the chances that you'll become rich?
But that's the chances that I'll become rich. It seems like a very specific skill. I guess I'm trying to think of more like larger problem solving skills.
Yeah, but larger problem-solving skills have to be tied to something that works. It ain't just a skill. If I teach you to run fast, it doesn't mean that you'll run fast. Maybe you're bored with running fast. If you teach big business skills to everybody, not everybody is interested in big business skills or will put them to use. You have to tie it to specific outputs, or if you can find people. See, I wanted to create $100 million fund to invest in companies capable of reaching transforming the livelihoods of 100 million people. I couldn't find any. The only one that has really worked, but there are huge opportunities, is mobile phones, and that was almost by accident. So teaching people big business skills doesn't necessarily do anything. The big business skills have to be tied to somebody motivated to make something work and to a process that creates a specific output. That's why I went specific on you. Because generic skills I regard as pretty useless. Well, I'll give you a piece of evidence. In India, there are thousands of people with master's degrees bussing dishes in restaurants. They have a lot of skills to do a lot of stuff. But what's lacking is the structures to harness those skills to create jobs or business. And knowing how to do it, and many of you are in design school. Learning how to design something doesn't mean that you're going to do nothing. You got to actually design something, right? You see what I mean? Does it make sense to you, or do you think I'm full?
It makes sense to you. To me.
Good stuff.
I could talk about it for a long time, but thank you for.
So on the ground, when you start to deal with a problem like photovoltaics, is it about investing in technology so you can bring the price point down to where your market can afford it, or is it about creating some structure where that, I mean, this might be better for water, but where it sort of takes care of itself, like at your scale, are you trying to deal with technology problems and product design problems, or is it more about creating sort of entrepreneurial seed that's going to let that innovation happen more locally?
Everybody hear the question? Are we more interested in solving technology problems or the entrepreneurial seed to make it happen? The answer is yes. Design is designing everything that it takes to make transformation. So you mentioned photovoltaics. Photovoltaics is a very promising way of generating electricity. We are working on a zero-based, what I call zero-based design. It's also described in the book. To cut the cost of existing photovoltaic systems between 200 watts and 2 kilowatts, which is what fits for a village, by 80%. And creating a last-mile delivery system involving partnerships with village enterprises and an international company that can deliver electricity that increases the livelihoods of the customers that need it. And you've got to design everything. And the design of the photovoltaic system is a systems design. You can't talk about solar technology. You have to talk. So we're working first on solar pumping. That means that you're talking about a system that consists of a photovoltaic electricity generating system, a pump, a motor, a water source, a mechanism to deliver the water from the source to the field, a mechanism to deliver it from the field to each plant, a business strategy that allows farmers to plant the plants at different times of year that will optimize their income, access to market for the products they produce. You see what I'm saying? You have to live within the context enough so that you understand the contextual problems of each piece of that so that you can complete the design. Now that sounds complicated, but in the end it's very simple.
Is that how you know when to let something just grow on its own? You know, if it's that last mile delivery system.
I don't let it grow on its own. I create a multinational company that systematically makes it grow. The company that sells safe drinking water is based on creating a holding company in the United States. That's called Windhorse International. It in turn created a company in India called Spring Health, in which it holds a majority interest. Spring Health in turn enters into contracts with small mom and pop shops in villages. There's 10 million of those in villages. And those mom and pop shops sell the water and we split the take with them, but we totally control the water quality so that nobody can cheat, and if they cheat, we kick them out. Now again, it sounds more complicated than it is, but you have to create, so now the implementing arm of this is all Indian. Spring Health is run by an Indian executive team and 110 full-time Indian staff from those villages. And part of the design is to make that whole operation a learning organization so that we're learning from customers all the time and changing everything every day from what we learn. So all of that is involved. Does that ring a bell for you? Okay.
We've talked a little bit about like lean startup in some of our entrepreneurship and leadership classes. And it sounds like designing an entire organization is not something that you can just launch a minimum viable product and do quickly. Could you maybe talk about the time horizons and the upfront planning and strategy that goes into building something like that actually functions?
Sure. We're about 3 years into the process with Spring Health, and we're now in the rollout phase. Our mission is to reach 100 million people by the 10th year. But if you want to reach scale, you have to build design for scale in from the very beginning. It doesn't mean that you do 1 million villages right away. It means that you have to think how you're going to design the organization of the business so that it will eventually reach scale. So it took us a while to develop the proof of concept of the business. The technology was simple because it was already available off the shelf, but it involved looking at water purification technologies from an agnostic point of view and picking the most cost effective. So we picked that technology. Then we did a beta test for 6 months, which failed miserably. Then we had to repeat the beta test and raise the money to do that, all with venture capital, so that people who invested got a piece of the action and were willing to take the risk. Then it took us longer to raise the rollout capital, so that by this time it's about 2.5 years. We finally put together the rollout capital in June, and now we're rolling out. But the beta test was done in 35 villages with about 40,000 customers. That's a pilot test for us.
What was your team size?
We had about 35 staff.
Who were getting paid to work on it?
Oh, yes. But again, this is all in India. So the average village staff person with a motorcycle gets paid about $135 a month. So you have to raise the venture capital to fund that. But from day one, we were designing everything to be carried out in blocks of 50 villages. Our organizational structure is based on developing marketing strategy to bring sales up to 1,200 liters per day in 50 villages at a time. So the beta test was to determine what the marketing strategies were and how they could be cost effectively scaled. So now, what we've learned, just to give you an example, it would be helpful to say more about how that works.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So now to do a block of, we are now in the process of doing a block of 50 villages. We have learned mostly by accident that there are really 4 main marketing strategies at work. One is we pick the right, usually there are 3 or 4 mom and pop shops. We enlist the village elders to tell us who the best shop is so that on day one we get a fair amount of sales because they're influential. We do an opening ceremony which draws a crowd. At this point that brings sales up to about 300 liters a day on opening day. We do door-to-door sales, and we've learned a hell of a lot about how to do that. In the beginning, we learned by accident that people are motivated to have the water they're drinking tested for E. coli. So we do E. coli tests, and the people, about 93% of them don't pass the E. coli test. When they actually see colonies of bugs growing in the water, that in the beginning gave us the best adoption rates, about 50% and about 25% then dropped out. Then more lately, we've learned that door-to-door sales, which gave us at first 9% adoption rate, is now at 25%. So we have 3 marketing strategies. One is a theater strategy where we at first hired our own staff to do a theater performance at each village twice. But we learned that a professional theater group does it much more effectively and with much more humor. So we hire a professional theater group. So we do 2 performances in every village. We do door-to-door sales, and we do water testing, which is also introduced by an entertainment. The numbers now, this is all recent stuff, but to do a block of 50 villages requires a recruit team, which is a specialist team. They survey villages, pick the right villages, talk to the elders, and pick the right shopkeeper to partner with and enter a contract. 3 full-time people can recruit 50 villages in a month. We have a 4-member specialist build team. They recruit local artisans to build a cement tank next to the shop in each village. Put a pipe in, put in some electricity, a lot of villages have pure water electricity, and build a structure around the shop where they are adding water. So it takes 4 people to hire the artisans and supervise them to build a structure for each shop. Then it takes 8 10-member door-to-door marketing teams to do door-to-door sales for door-to-door calls on most of the people in every village. An additional 15-member water testing team. So it takes about close to 100 specialists to recruit villages, build a structure, and most importantly, do the marketing to bring the sales up very quickly. But lately, we've gotten the sales up to 1,200 liters a day in 3 days. Originally, our plan called for 4 months. I think we can actually reach that pretty regularly, but it takes that many specialists. Once we know what it takes, and then these 100 specialists go on to the next block of 50 villages, and 3.5 full-time operations team handles the 50 villages from then on. that model makes a lot of money if it'll work. The point is then that we then will expand in multiples of blocks of 50 villages. So if you lay out all of the steps it takes to do a block of 50 villages in 1 month, in the third year we plan to do 450 villages a month. That's the kind of work that you need to do to create scale.
Hi, my name is Diora. And I was just wondering, so this is quite obviously a large-scale operation as far as manpower, and it's very hierarchical, like on an international level. So how do you sort of keep track and follow up that all of the people that are involved in the operation stay on the same mission, and that it doesn't veer off into different sort of intents, that everybody remains focused on the mission of the company to provide, to make, to provide safe drinking water, and no other interests sort of start to intervene in the process.
We have a conventional structure. We have a board in India, which is composed of mostly Indian board members, but I'm the chairman of the board. Kishan Nanavati is the CEO. He comes from having run 25,000 mobile phone kiosks in one of the states of India. Jacob Matthew was the first CEO. He's the founder of what I consider to be the cutting-edge design firm in India, which has been around for 25, 30 years, and he got interested in social enterprise, and he designed the initial branding strategy that his firm did, and then he took over as CEO, so he's an executive board member. The three of us, I haven't talked to them since this morning, but we're in touch a lot. And we have very specific output expectations from everybody, including the shopkeepers. We keep track of daily sales from every village by cell phone. And we're now implementing a pressure sensor designed by a Stanford group for us that we insert into each tank that will tell us if there's a sudden increase in water, so that that's what would happen if somebody starts selling water that's untreated. So it requires building a data system and all of that stuff. It's standard, but it's not as hierarchical as you might think. The shopkeepers are usually entrepreneurs, and the one shopkeeper, for instance, runs a small furniture making business and a firewood business. And one unexpected finding is that their status is significantly increased by being the person that brings safe water to the village, which has profound impact on their ability to successfully operate their other businesses. So you can't drive them off with a stick. They really are motivated to stay. And we have a program where 10% of the profits are reserved for the shopkeepers, and so it's you know the whole movement about creating businesses that meet certain value criteria. This fits most of those criteria that's built in. So we're creating a different breed of international business at the same time. At least that's what we're trying to do. There's a lot of risk in it, yeah.
And if this succeeds in India, do you see scaling it to another continent or another place in the world? I mean,
Oh yes, that's what the plan.
Yeah.
That's why we created a holding company.
right. Okay.
Windhorse then will create another Springhorse type company.
And
In 2 years, we plan to go to 2 or 3 more countries. Probably a couple in Asia and 1 in Africa. And then we plan to be in 50 countries using the same model.
awesome.
That's part of the scale thing, and
Yeah.
that's for every company.
there been any competition, or is there anyone else doing anything similar to what you're doing?
Surprisingly, no. I mean, I was sort of paranoid at the beginning. I never would have shared details like this with anybody because I didn't want anybody to steal the idea. Now we've had this thing going with drinking water in India for 2.5 years. Nobody's copied it.
Is there a big barrier that stops somebody from entering and competing with you?
Well, some experienced people predicted exactly what happened. Basically, what I think is big business doesn't think you can make money serving their customers, so they're not interested. I've talked to a lot of corporations. They're interested in like Ball Aerospace is providing the engineers that are designing the photovoltaic system. There's a lot of interest, but not. Ball isn't going to jump into that business. They have no interest in jumping into the business. In terms of the local, there's 3,000 or 4,000 water kiosks in India now. But they're chasing government contracts, and the government contracts specify reverse osmosis, and that costs a hell of a lot more. There's no way you can do in small villages, so they're chasing the government contracts. We're not chasing government contracts. So it would be a real change in their values and their operating styles to do it this way. If we're successful, I think people will start jumping in, but I don't know when. And I'm not worried about. I'm very open about all our secrets because so far there's, and hopefully once we reach a tipping point, we'll scale so fast, and we have so many other products waiting that. I mean, the way you reach scale is when people begin to compete with you.
You mentioned at the end of poverty that your concepts can certainly translate to work domestically. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the challenges and opportunities differ for reaching an audience in the U.S.
What kind of an audience?
Trying to implement solutions to helping people out of poverty here.
In cities, in rural areas, in student groups studying design? Which kind of group?
Why not?
I think I'm thinking specifically about urban populations, homeless populations here in the U.S.
Yeah, I've looked at that. I haven't done, I've interviewed 3,000 rural people in developing countries, so I feel I know more about that. But I've done some stuff with homeless people. The first video I made was a guy named Joe who lived under a loading dock in Denver. There's some basically this stuff applies. Joe had a lot of trouble finding a safe place to store his stuff. He had a real good sleeping bag, and he couldn't leave it under the loading dock because people steal. In fact, he had a crowbar to defend himself. So he went to the bus station, and it was supposed to charge, I think, 75 cents a day, but he came back 2 hours later, and they charged him another 75 cents. So he eventually found a railway station which worked. But we talked about setting up a business run by homeless people that provided a safe place to store their stuff, as well as some other things that homeless people need. The thing in urban areas that are poor in this country, just like in slums in India, is jobs. And there are lots of opportunities to create new, looking at homeless populations in other cities, that thing about a safe place to secure their stuff is pretty much everywhere. So there's an opportunity for a business. It's not a multinational corporation, but you start with homeless people themselves as customers. One of the other ideas I had is a little controversial. A lot of them smoke and spend money on cigarettes. You could get homeless people to roll cigarettes. Now, cigarettes aren't good for you, but if people are going to buy them anyway, why not create businesses where homeless people can make money? by providing the products that homeless people buy. A lot of mentally ill homeless people are consumers of medications, especially psychiatric medications. We created a model in Boulder for a pharmacy in which patients were staff and had partial ownership. That was a little bit complex, but it worked. You see what I mean? So these things apply here as well as overseas.
We probably have time for one more question,
Oh,
because
you're kidding.
we're on borrowed time. I have two classes, two faculty who are giving us their students.
Okay, I didn't know it was, well, maybe it went by too fast and I talked too much.
You've been here for 3 hours.
Yeah. Can we have 3 short questions?
We happy to give, I don't know for the other teacher, but happy to give some more time, because it ties with a lot of things that they're talking in class anyway. I think, I'm sure the students will sign up.
So what's the decision? We're going to go for another few minutes or start?
Well, we still have another few minutes, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's keep the questions and especially me the answers short. Yeah,
If you could start over, what would you do different?
not much.
That was short.
No, I think that it doesn't matter what you start with. It's creating a learning process and sticking to it. It's the process rather than the product that learns. And if you learn every day, things work out. Yes.
I'm curious about like the future of rural areas in developing countries, and your thoughts on this sort of push towards universal internet access across the globe, and what that might mean for like changes in the economic opportunities that are available to people in rural areas. Like right now, it's a lot of small farmers. So how that might change the economic structures and opportunities.
Most of the internet solutions to poverty are bullshit. Most of the really poor people don't have access to the internet. Google is talking about balloons and so on, and some people at Google think that that's just silly. But the reality is that with the onset of, there are 600,000 mobile phone towers in India right now. I think that the things are changing radically with access to mobile phone technology. And most poor people, even if they don't own a mobile phone, have access to one. So that has already created huge changes. I think one of the opportunities for creating a company is to create a private school system with aspirational brand identity, which uses distance learning by the low-cost tablets that are coming and mobile phones. But each country is in a different place, and each rural area is in a different place. You've got to start. You can't leapfrog to industrialization. That's a joke. You have to start by agriculture and improving the income from agriculture, which builds an infrastructure which leads to the other stuff. So you can't jump that phase. Introducing internet or introducing distance learning ain't going to do that. You're going to have to do the grunt work of finding out which crops are most profitable for each agroclimatic zone and helping farmers deal with the access to information, seeds, irrigation, and markets, especially the small farmers, to increase their income, which will lead to the infrastructure which will make that other stuff possible.
So I have an idea. So why don't we move into the quiet room, which is probably cooler, and anybody who is not in class can come and keep talking to you. Is that okay, Paul?
Sure. But if it's quiet, I'll be quiet.
I'm moving there so you don't talk.
And for my class, we're going, because you should have in class, we'll go to the small class